This screencast is to support this reading skills and vocabulary lesson on the topic of how we spend our time. The source for the materials is New Cutting Edge Intermediate, Module 1 by S. Cunningham and P. Moore, published by Longman. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to engage students in the topic and get them speaking together. So you could start off with exercise 1, where they have to match the phrases in A to their opposites in B. And they could then use this language to talk about the phrases in the box. And exercise 2 says make 8 true sentences about the activities. Okay, so it's up to you. You can do 8, you can do fewer, but you could get the matching, talking together and finding out a little bit about each other. The vocabulary is pretty straightforward, and at this level you wouldn't need to pre-teach anything. I'd suggest not doing exercise 3, as we can do that later as a productive skills activity at the end of the lesson. Next, we want to prepare the students for the text that they're going to read. And in order to do that, we can pre-teach some of this vocabulary, which they need in order to be able to understand the text. So it says, read the following statements, checking the phrases in bold in your mini dictionary. They don't have a mini dictionary, okay? And then which do you think are true for your country? So the first thing we need to do is look through this list of statements and decide which words and phrases we want to pre-teach. Which ones do we think our students may not know? I would suggest main share of the housework, main share of something. Ready meals and takeaways are useful words to know that they may not be totally clear on. A full-time job, they should know that, but it's worth checking. Socialising, to socialise as a verb. Okay, to be physically active. And waste time is a really nice expression as well. Okay, so I would choose a maximum of 6 to pre-teach. So you could pre-teach these by getting them to match words with definitions, or giving them sentences with gaps where they have to put the correct phrase in. That will check that they understand the meaning. Get them to peer check and feedback and make sure they've got the right answers to the little task you've made. And then you can ask some concept checking questions. For example, the main share. What's another word for the main share? You want to try and elicit majority, for example, or most of something. You might need to check the form of some of these. So work full-time. Okay. How else could I use full-time? I could use it as before a noun. So I could say a full-time job. Okay. And there's a little hyphen in between the adjective and the noun to make the full adjective. And then you can practice some pronunciation. So which of these words and phrases that you've taught would be difficult for them to say? Which ones are you going to drill? So for example, I might choose takeaway. How many syllables? Takeaway. 3. Where's the stress? Takeaway. It's on the first syllable. Good. Elicit that from the students. And how about this one? Waste a lot of time. Waste a lot of time. A lot of time. What happens to the word of? It becomes of. Becomes very weak. A lot of time. Waste a lot of time. Okay, so working on the phrases in context. Now that you've pre-taught the vocabulary, students can read the sentences with the vocabulary in them, and they can do the little task here. Which do you think are true for your country? So for example, people are working longer hours than in the past. So get your students into groups and get them talking about these things. Are they true or false for their country? So do the first one together. Sentence A, what do you think? Get some feedback. Okay, good. So now I want you to talk together in small groups and discuss whether these sentences are true in your country. Get them talking together and then you can get some feedback afterwards. So now they've done a lot of discussion around the topic and they've learned some new vocabulary. They can start to read the text, how we really spend our time. So they need to do exercise 2 here. Read the text quickly. Which country or countries does each of the statements in exercise 1 refer to? And which are true all over the world? So the sentences they've just discussed about their own countries, they can now read the text and see which country or countries each of those statements refers to. So they need to read the text quickly. They're not reading every detail. They don't need to understand every word. So make this clear when you're setting it up. Give them about 5 minutes to read the text and answer the questions. Once you're happy they've got the answers, get them to check together and get some feedback. And make sure that when you checking the answers that they can see the written answers. You might want to highlight parts of the text, or you can just put your answers on the slide. So there's lots of different information about different countries in the text. They can then move on to exercise 3. Underline 4 things in the text that you think are surprising or interesting. So give the students some time to look through the text and do that, and then get them to compare their answers with their classmates and see if they all have the same kinds of answers or quite different ones. Next, there's a little bit more language work in exercise 4. They need to look at the different phrases and mark them S if they both mean the same and D if they're different. So for example, A, 2/3 is the same as 66%, so they put an S. Do B as an example, and see if they can work out if it's the same or different. Get the answer. Once you're happy that they've understood what they need to do, they can do C down to I. They can do this alone, and when they've finished, they can compare their answers, and you can show them the answers on the slide. Remember in feedback to check anything that they've been struggling with or are still unsure about. Moving on to exercise 5, it says, what was the significance of the following numbers in what you read? Look back at the text if necessary. Well, I would definitely allow them to look at the text, otherwise it's just an exercise in memory rather than reading skills. So I would get them to look at the text again, the full text in blue, and answer the questions. So for example, 85% refers to this information in the text. 85% of British people regularly read newspapers. Okay, so they can do those either together or alone and then check together before you get the answers from them. It's always nice to end the lesson with a nice speaking activity to practice their productive skills. And number 6 is a nice starter for this. It says, are you happy with the way you use your time? What would you like to spend more or less time doing? Discuss in groups. So to help them with ideas for this, you could come back to the activities in the box that they looked at the start of the lesson in exercise 2 and put those on your slide. And then in small groups, you could encourage them to ask the questions in exercise 3. So they talk to each other using this vocabulary. So for example, do you like playing computer games? No, I don't. I prefer listening to music, for example. Do you spend much time doing exercise? No, I spend more time watching TV. I would like to spend more time doing exercise, etc., etc. So using all of this language to get them talking together about things that they like doing with their time, things that they wish they did more of with their time, and using the ideas that we've been looking at throughout the lesson. While the students are speaking together, monitor and make a note of any good examples of sentences that you hear, any errors in their speech, particularly ones that focus on this language. And you can use those later to do some post-fluency correction. So once they've discussed their ideas, get them all back together as a big group and nominate some students to tell you who they spoke to and what they found out about that person. Then you can focus on the errors and the good examples of language that you heard. So you could put 2 or 3 sentences up in the chat box or on the board and ask the students to look at them and first of all identify which ones are correct, which are incorrect. And once they've done that correctly, they can then try to correct the errors. The students will enjoy speaking about and learning about the different ways that people spend their time in different countries.